March 3, 1943. The Bismarck Sea. A modified B-25 Mitchell bomber screams across the water at 50 feet altitude, so low the propellers kick up white spray from the wave tops. On the deck of a Japanese destroyer, a 20-millimeter gunner swings his cannon toward the approaching aircraft. He has maybe 3 seconds to fire before it passes. His finger moves toward the trigger. He never reaches it. 8 heavy machine guns in the bomber's nose open up simultaneously. 120 rounds hit the destroyer's deck in less than 2 seconds. The gunner, his weapon, and 14 men standing behind him are torn apart instantly. The steel plating of the superstructure peels away like paper. The bridge windows explode inward. Bodies and equipment are thrown into the water. The plane roars overhead without dropping a single bomb. It does not need to. It just killed half the crew with gunfire alone. This is not how bombers are supposed to work, but this is not a normal bomber anymore. This is the result of one man ignoring every engineer, every regulation, and every warning he received. His name is Paul Gunn. And 8 months earlier, the experts told him this modification would kill him. The year's 1942, and the United States is losing the air war over the Pacific. Not because of pilot skill or courage. The Americans are losing because of math. High-altitude bombing against ships is a disaster. A B-17 drops its bombs from 20,000 feet. The bombs take 40 seconds to fall. In those 40 seconds, a destroyer captain simply turns his wheel. The bombs splash into empty ocean. Mission after mission returns with the same report. 0 hits, 0 kills, tons of bombs wasted. General George Kenney, the new commander of the 5th Air Force, reads these reports every day and wants to throw them in the trash. He has hundreds of bombers, but they cannot sink a single moving ship. Meanwhile, Japanese convoys are sailing freely, delivering thousands of troops to reinforce New Guinea. If those reinforcements land, the Allies will lose the island. Australia will be next. Kenney needs a solution immediately. But the factories back in the United States are not sending him new aircraft designs. He has to win with what he has right now. What he has is a 42-year-old mechanic and pilot named Paul Gunn. Everyone calls him Pappy because he is twice the age of most pilots in the squadron. But Pappy Gunn is not a regular military man. Before the war, he owned a small airline in the Philippines. He flew cargo routes, repaired engines with his own hands, and made a good life for his wife and 4 children. Then, the Japanese invaded. Gunn evacuated some civilians to Australia, but he could not get back in time. The Japanese captured his family. Right now, his wife Eleanor and his 4 kids are locked in an internment camp in Manila. Gunn has not slept more than 4 hours a night since then. He does not talk about his family to the other men. He does not need to. Everyone in the squadron knows. They see it in the way he works. He chain smokes cigars not because he enjoys them, but because the nicotine keeps him awake while he spends 18-hour days tearing apart aircraft engines and rebuilding them better than the factory did. Every single Japanese ship still floating is a ship carrying supplies to the guards who are holding his children. Every day the war drags on is another day his wife is drinking dirty water in a camp where dysentery kills prisoners every week. Gunn does not want medals. He does not care about strategy. He wants to kill the enemy so fast they surrender before his family starves to death. Gunn looks at the B-25 Mitchell bomber and sees a weapon being used wrong. It is a tough airplane, fast and reliable, powered by 2 Wright Cyclone engines that can take battle damage and keep running. But it was designed to fly level at medium altitude and drop bombs on factories or bridges. It has defensive guns to protect it from fighters attacking from behind. The forward firepower is pathetic. There's just one flexible 50 caliber machine gun in the glass nose, and the bombardier has to aim it by hand while also trying to line up the bomb sight. Against a warship with dozens of anti-aircraft guns, it is completely useless. Gunn goes to General Kenney with a proposal that sounds completely insane. He wants to stop bombing from altitude entirely. He wants to bring the B-25 down to the deck and fly straight at the enemy ships at mast height. He wants to attack them the way a fighter would strafe a ground target. But to do that, he needs to suppress the ship's anti-aircraft fire first. A destroyer has gunners all over the deck. If Gunn flies straight at them, they will shred the B-25's thin aluminum skin and kill the crew before the plane gets close enough to drop anything. So Gunn wants to outgun them. He wants to rip out the bombardier station, throw away the complicated bomb sight, and turn the entire nose of the B-25 into a battery of heavy machine guns. Not one or two. He wants 8 of them. 4 mounted inside the nose where the bombardier used to sit, all bolted to a steel frame and aimed straight ahead. 4 more mounted in external pods on the sides of the fuselage. All 8 guns will be controlled by the pilot using a single trigger on the control stick. Gunn wants to turn a medium bomber into the most heavily armed aircraft in the Pacific. When the civilian engineers from North American Aviation, the company that built the B-25, hear about this plan, they send an urgent message to Australia. They say it is impossible. They explain that the weight of 8 50 caliber guns plus the ammunition will move the center of gravity too far forward. The plane will be dangerously nose heavy. It will not be able to take off without pitching forward into the ground. If it somehow does get airborne, it will be unstable in flight. When the pilot tries to land, the nose will drop and the plane will cartwheel down the runway, killing everyone on board. The engineers are not being cautious. They genuinely believe Paul Gunn is about to kill himself and waste a valuable aircraft. General Kenny reads the engineer's warnings. Then he looks at Gunn standing in front of his desk, covered in grease stains, smelling like cigar smoke and aviation fuel. Kenny makes a decision. He tells Gunn to ignore the engineers. He gives him 3 B-25s and permission to modify them however he wants. If it works, they will change the war. If it fails, Kenny will take the blame. Gunn does not have factory blueprints. He does not have precision tools or a clean workshop. He has a dirt airstrip in Queensland, Australia, a pile of scrap metal, a welding torch, and a crew of mechanics who are equally angry about losing the war. They work in temperatures over 100 degrees, with dust blowing into everything. They tear the glass nose off the first B-25 like they are gutting a fish. The entire bombardier compartment comes out. The bomb sight, the seat, the instruments, all of it goes into the scrap pile. Gunn sketches a design on a piece of paper. He needs a steel frame strong enough to hold 4 50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, each weighing 84 pounds, plus the weight of the ammunition belts. He scavenges steel plating from damaged aircraft. He personally welds the frame together, checking the angles over and over. The 4 guns have to be aligned perfectly, so they all converge on the same point about 300 yards in front of the plane. If even one gun is off by a few degrees, it will waste ammunition and reduce the effective firepower. Then he cuts holes in the sides of the fuselage just behind the cockpit and mounts 2 more guns on each side in aerodynamic blisters. The mechanics think he has lost his mind. They have never seen anything like this. No bomber in history has carried this much forward-firing armament. Gunn does not care. He keeps working. He runs the ammunition belts from storage boxes in the fuselage up into the gun bays. Each 50 caliber round is 5.5 inches long and weighs half a pound. He loads 1,000 rounds per gun. That is 8,000 rounds total, weighing over 4,000 pounds, not counting the guns themselves. The math is terrifying. Each gun fires at 750 rounds per minute. 8 guns firing together means 6,000 rounds per minute, 100 rounds every single second. The kinetic energy is insane, 50 pounds of lead hitting the target every second. But there is another problem: the recoil. When all 8 guns fire at once, they are generating enough backward force to slow the airplane down as if one of the 2 engines had been shut off. Gunn does not know if the airframe can handle that. The wings might crack, the fuselage might buckle. He does not have the engineering software or the wind tunnel data to test it. He just has to fly it and find out. When the first prototype is finally ready, it looks brutal and ugly. The smooth glass nose that used to give the bombardier a panoramic view is gone. In its place is a flat steel plate with 4 black holes where the gun barrels stick out. The side blisters bulge out from the fuselage like tumors. It does not look like a precision instrument. It looks like something built by angry men in a hurry. The engineers are still sending warnings. Do not fly it. It will crash. General Kenny tells Gunn he does not have to test it himself. They can assign another pilot. Gunn refuses. If this thing is going to kill someone, it will be him. He climbs into the cockpit, lights a cigar, and starts the engines. The ground crew stands back. Everyone on the airfield is watching. Mechanics, pilots, even some reporters. They all expect to see a fireball. Gunn taxis to the runway. He does not do a slow, cautious takeoff. He pushes both throttles to full power. The Wright Cyclone engines roar. The B-25 accelerates down the dirt strip, bouncing hard on the uneven ground. The tail comes up. The nose stays down, heavy, exactly like the engineers predicted. Gunn pulls back on the control stick. Nothing. He pulls harder. The nose fights him. He can feel the weight of the guns and ammunition trying to drag the plane into the dirt. His knuckles are white. He pulls with both hands. The wheels leave the ground. The bomber claws into the air, sluggish and angry. The climb rate is terrible. Gunn levels off at 500 feet and turns out over the ocean. He tests the controls. The plane responds, but it feels nose-heavy, like flying a brick. He is burning more fuel than normal just to keep it in the air. But it is flying. The engineers were wrong, or at least wrong enough. Now comes the real test. Gunn finds his target, an old rusted shipwreck sitting on a reef about 2 miles offshore. It is the remains of a Japanese freighter that ran aground months earlier. He lines it up in his makeshift gun sight, just a pair of metal rings welded to the cockpit frame. He pushes the nose down into a shallow dive, accelerating. The wreck grows larger in the windscreen. At 400 yards, he puts his thumb on the firing button. At 300 yards, he presses it. The sound is unbelievable. 8 heavy machine guns open up at once. The noise is so loud it drowns out the engines. The entire airplane shudders violently. The control stick vibrates so hard, Gunn almost loses his grip. Bright tracer rounds stream out from the nose like a river of fire. He counts to 3. 150 rounds in 3 seconds. He releases the trigger. The wreck is gone. Not damaged. Gone. The rusted hull has been torn open in a dozen places. Entire sections of metal have peeled away and collapsed. A mast that was still standing snaps in half and topples into the water. Smoke and steam pour out of the holes. Pieces of debris are still splashing down into the sea. Gunn flew past it so fast he barely had time to see the destruction. He banks around and makes another pass to confirm what he saw. There is nothing left to shoot at. In 3 seconds of fire, he just delivered more bullets onto that target than a dozen B-17s could drop bombs in an entire mission, and every single one of those bullets hit exactly where he aimed. No waiting for bombs to fall, no hoping the target does not turn, just point and destroy. Gunn keys his radio. He reports back to base. The plane is stable, the guns work. The engineers were wrong. General Kenny orders him to land immediately and start building more. Within 2 weeks, Gunn and his crew have converted 5 more B-25s into strafers. They call them gunships. Kenny has a different name. He calls them commerce destroyers. Because Gunn is not hunting fighters. He is hunting ships. And now, he finally has the weapon to kill them. 2 weeks after Gunn's first test flight, 5 modified B-25 strafers are sitting on the flight line at Port Moresby, New Guinea. They look like predators. The ground crews have painted shark teeth on the metal noses right above the gun barrels. It is not just for intimidation, it is a warning. These planes do not drop bombs from a safe distance anymore. They bite. But Gunn knows that having the guns is only half the solution. He still has to teach the pilots how to use them without getting killed. Flying a medium bomber at wave-top height directly at a warship is not something anyone has ever trained for. The standard doctrine says bombers stay high, stay safe, and let gravity do the work. What Gunn is proposing is the opposite. Get low, get close, turn the airplane into a gun platform. It is fighter tactics in a bomber's body, and it is going to get people killed if they do it wrong. The problem is physics and human reaction time. A B-25 cruising at 220 miles per hour covers 300 feet every second. At that speed and that altitude, there is no room for mistakes. If the pilot misjudges his dive angle by even 2 degrees, the plane will slam into the ocean and disintegrate. If he hesitates for 1 second when the enemy starts shooting back, the anti-aircraft fire will shred the cockpit and kill him before he can pull up. The margin for error is 0. Gunn gathers the pilots in a briefing tent. These are experienced men. They have flown dozens of bombing missions, but when Gunn explains what he wants them to do, Some of them look at him like he is insane. He wants them to approach the target at 50 feet above the water. 50 feet, that is lower than the mast of a destroyer. At that altitude, if an engine fails, there is no time to restart it or bail out. You just go straight into the sea. Then comes the hard part. Gunn explains the new bombing technique he has invented. He calls it skip bombing. The idea is simple but terrifying. Instead of dropping bombs from high altitude and hoping they fall near the target, the pilot will fly directly at the side of the ship at full speed. At the last possible second, maybe 300 yards out, he will release a bomb with a delayed fuse. The bomb will hit the water, skip across the surface like a flat stone, and slam into the hull of the ship below the waterline. Then, the fuse will detonate and blow the ship open from the inside. One of the pilots raises his hand and asks the obvious question. What happens if the bomb does not skip? What if it just sinks or explodes early? Gunn does not sugarcoat the answer. If the bomb detonates while the plane is still nearby, the shock wave will rip the B-25 apart. The pilot has to release at exactly the right moment, at exactly the right altitude, and then pull up hard and bank away while flying through the explosions of his own weapons. There is no practice range for this, no simulator. The first time they do it for real will be against a live enemy who is shooting back. But here is where the strafer modification changes everything. Before the pilot even gets close enough to drop the bomb, he will open up with the 8 forward-firing machine guns. The goal is not to sink the ship with bullets. 50 caliber rounds can damage a destroyer, but they cannot penetrate the armored sections. The goal is suppression. When 100 rounds per second start slamming into the deck, the enemy gunners have 2 choices: duck for cover or die. Either way, they stop shooting. That gives the bomber a few precious seconds to line up the skip bomb and release it without getting blown out of the sky. Gunn takes the pilots out to practice. They use a coral reef as a simulated target. He makes them fly approach after approach, coming in low over the water, holding altitude at exactly 50 feet, lining up the imaginary ship, and then breaking away at the last second. Some of the pilots are good at it immediately. Others are terrible. One young lieutenant almost flies straight into a wave because he is so focused on the target he forgets to watch his altitude. Gunn screams at him over the radio, "Pay attention or you will kill yourself and waste my airplane." After 3 days of training, Gunn decides they are as ready as they are ever going to be. General Kenny has been waiting for this. Intelligence reports say the Japanese are moving another convoy south toward New Guinea. 8 destroyers escorting 8 transport ships loaded with troops and supplies. If that convoy gets through, the Japanese will have enough reinforcements to push the Allies off the island. Kenny needs it stopped. He gives Gunn the mission: sink the convoy. Use whatever method works. Gunn does not just plan to use the strafers. He coordinates with conventional bombers and fighters. The attack will come in waves. First, high-altitude B-17s will drop bombs to force the convoy to break formation and maneuver. The bombs probably will not hit anything, but they will scatter the ships and make them panic. Then, A-20 attack planes will come in and drop more bombs to keep the chaos going. Finally, when the enemy is confused and disorganized, Gunn's strafers will come in at wave-top height and finish the job. The night before the mission, Gunn sits alone in his tent. He does not sleep. He thinks about his family. He's not heard anything from the internment camp in months. He does not know if his wife is still alive. He does not know if his kids remember what he looks like. Every letter he tries to send gets blocked by the Japanese. Every Red Cross message goes unanswered. The only thing he can do is keep killing the enemy and hope that eventually someone in Tokyo realizes the war is lost and surrenders before more people die. He thinks about the pilots he is sending out tomorrow. Some of them will not come back. Skip bombing at 50 feet with enemy destroyers shooting at you is not a mission with a high survival rate, but if they succeed, they will save thousands of Allied soldiers who would otherwise have to fight those Japanese reinforcements in the jungle. War is math. You trade lives. You just try to make sure you are trading fewer than the enemy. March 2nd, 1943. Dawn. The strafers take off from their airstrip in New Guinea and form up over the water. Gunn is flying the lead aircraft. His co-pilot is a young officer who has never been in combat before. The kid is nervous. His hands are shaking. Gunn tells him to relax. If they do this right, It will be over in 10 minutes. If they do it wrong, it will be over even faster. They fly north for 2 hours, skimming low over the ocean to avoid Japanese radar. The sun is rising behind them. Ahead, somewhere beyond the horizon, is the convoy. Gunn's radio crackles. The high-altitude bombers have spotted the ships and are beginning their attack. Gunn checks his watch, right on schedule. He keys his mic and tells his squadron to prepare for combat. Then he sees them. 8 destroyers in a defensive screen around 8 fat transport ships. The transports are huge, slow, and packed with soldiers. The destroyers are smaller, faster, and covered in anti-aircraft guns. Black smoke is pouring from their stacks as they maneuver to avoid the bombs falling from the B-17s high above. Explosions erupt in the water around them, throwing up massive columns of white spray. The Japanese captains are doing exactly what Gunn expected. They are turning hard, zigzagging, trying to make themselves harder to hit. Gunn picks his target, a destroyer on the eastern edge of the formation. It is turning broadside, exposing its full length. Perfect. He pushes the nose down and accelerates. The altimeter drops. 100 feet, 70, 50. The ocean is rushing past below him so fast it looks like a gray blur. His co-pilot is staring at the water with wide eyes, gripping his seat. Gunn ignores him. He focuses on the destroyer growing larger in his windscreen. The enemy gunners see him. Tracers start arcing toward the B-25, bright orange lines of fire coming up from the ship. A 20-millimeter cannon opens up. Explosions burst in the air around the plane. Shrapnel pings off the aluminum skin. Gunn does not flinch. He holds his course. At 600 yards, he puts his thumb on the firing button. At 400 yards, he presses it. The 8 machine guns roar to life. The nose of the plane lights up with muzzle flashes. Tracers stream out in a solid cone of fire. The rounds hit the destroyer's deck like a sledgehammer. Metal sparks. Men fall. The bridge windows shatter. The 20-millimeter gun that was shooting at him suddenly goes silent. The gunner is dead. Gunn holds the trigger down. 2 seconds. 3, 4. He is pouring 500 rounds into the ship. The superstructure is being torn apart. Then he releases the trigger and reaches for the bomb release. At 300 yards, traveling at 230 miles per hour, he pickles off a 500-pound bomb with a 4-second delayed fuse. The bomb drops from the belly of the B-25, falls 20 feet, and hits the water nose first. For a split second, Gunn thinks it is going to sink. Then it bounces. The bomb skips across the surface like a stone, riding the momentum from the plane. It skips once, twice. On the third skip, it slams into the hull of the destroyer just below the waterline and sticks. Gunn pulls up hard and banks right, shoving the throttles to full power. The B-25 claws for altitude. Behind him, the bomb's fuse is counting down. 4 seconds. 3. The destroyer's crew has no idea what just happened. They felt the impact, but they do not see the bomb lodged against their hull. 2 seconds. 1. The bomb detonates. 500 pounds of high explosive goes off inside the thin steel plating of the destroyer's hull. The blast rips a hole 15 feet wide below the waterline. Water floods in instantly. The destroyer shudders and starts to list. Gunn looks back over his shoulder and sees smoke pouring from the gash in the ship's side. Men are jumping overboard. The destroyer is dying. But Gunn does not have time to watch. The other strafers are making their runs. Another B-25 screams past him, guns blazing, heading for a second destroyer. More bombs hit the water, more explosions. The ocean is churning with debris and fire. The Japanese convoy is not a convoy anymore. It is a killing field. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea is over, but the story that started with one man and a welding torch is not. To understand what his invention really did, you have to start far from the wreckage, in a place with no airplanes at all. February 1945, Manila, Philippines. American troops push through the shattered streets of a city that has been bombed, shelled, and burned for weeks. They are not just looking for enemy soldiers, they are looking for prisoners. Near the edge of the city stands Santo Tomas internment camp, a former university turned into a cage for thousands of civilians. The Japanese have held them here for 3 years with barely enough food to keep them alive. The gates are reinforced, the guards are armed. The prisoners inside do not know if help is coming or if they have been forgotten. When American tanks finally smash the gates open and soldiers pour in, they find a crowd of 3,000 people who look more like skeletons than civilians. Many cannot stand without assistance. Some do not recognize the uniforms of their rescuers at first. They have spent so long under Japanese control that they are afraid this is a trick. Somewhere in that crowd, a 45-year-old woman stands holding 4 exhausted, underfed children close to her. She has not heard news from her husband since 1942. For 3 years, she has had to decide every day whether to believe he is dead or trust that he is still out there, fighting. Her name is Eleanor Gunn. Her husband is very much alive. Right now, he is not in Manila. He is in New Guinea, standing in front of a map covered in red and blue pins, reading the official report on what his modified bombers did to the Japanese convoy in the Bismarck Sea. The numbers are cold and impersonal. 8 transports sunk, 4 destroyers sunk, 4 destroyers heavily damaged, over 2,000 enemy personnel lost, most drowned or trapped below decks. Allied losses, 2 aircraft and 5 airmen. The language is dry, but to Paul "Pappy" Gunn, every line is a pulse in the same direction. It means pressure. It means the Japanese shipping lanes are no longer safe. It means the empire that locked his family in a camp is bleeding faster than before. At the debrief that follows, the pilots and gunners try to describe what they saw. They talk about ships breaking in half. They talk about men diving over the sides as bombs detonated beneath their feet. They talk about gun crews simply disappearing under the impact of 8 guns firing at once. One pilot admits that during his run, he saw a Japanese sailor looking straight at his plane through binoculars. A fraction of a second later, the sailor and the binoculars were gone, replaced by a spray of debris and vapor. The pilot says the image keeps replaying in his mind like a stuck film frame. The intelligence officer listening does not write that part down. The report does not have a box for nightmares. General George Kenney takes a different kind of note. He sends copies of the combat film and written data back to the United States. He does not send them as a polite suggestion. He sends them as a demand for change. His cover letter is blunt. He states that low-level strafing and skip bombing with heavily armed B-25s is now the primary method for attacking shipping in his theater, and that the aircraft factories must stop treating it as an experimental field modification and start producing planes configured that way from the start. He knows how the system works. Without formal pressure, Gunn's work will be praised in speeches and then ignored in production. Several weeks later, at the North American Aviation Plant in Inglewood, California, a senior engineer receives Kenney's packet. This is the same man who earlier signed the warning cables saying Gunn's nose-heavy design would crash and burn. Now he opens a folder full of photographs and diagrams. There are images of wrecked Japanese ships listing at 40 degrees with their hulls torn open. There are gun camera frames showing 8 streams of tracers converging on enemy decks. There is a chart showing tonnage sunk per sortie before and after the strafer modification. The lines are unmistakable. Before, nearly flat. After, spiking upward like a cliff. Attached is a short message from Kenney. It does not bother with politeness. It says, in effect, "Your calculations were wrong, Gunn was right, and I need more planes like his as fast as you can build them." The engineer sits in silence for a moment. No one likes being proven wrong, especially when the proof is measured in ships sunk and men killed. But the numbers are there, the photographs are there. The conclusion is not optional. He walks into the design office holding the folder. The drafting tables are covered with blueprints for the existing B-25 models, all based on the original concept of a glass-nosed bomber with a bombardier. The engineer drops Gunn sketches and the combat photos on the table and tells his team something very simple. Forget the old nose. Build this instead. Reinforce the framing. Clean up the field modifications. Give them ammunition feed systems that do not jam in tropical humidity. The Jungle Workshop in New Guinea has already provided the prototype. The factory just has to industrialize it. Over the next months, new variants roll off the production line. They have solid metal noses with built-in mounts for 4 heavy machine guns, plus additional guns in cheek mounts and side packs. Where there used to be glass in a bomb sight, there is now armor and firepower. Training manuals are updated. Tactics sections that once focused on altitude, bomb patterns, and formation spacing now include low-level attack profiles, recommended approach heights, and best practices for skip bombing. What once looked like a violation of every rule becomes doctrine. On the front lines, Gunn does not have time to care about the politics of factory design. He is busy suing the idea he fought for. Strafer B-25s do not retire after a single battle. They become the everyday workhorses of the Southwest Pacific. They hit coastal convoys trying to sneak supplies along jungle-covered shorelines under cloud cover. They attack airfields at dawn, racing down runways and chewing up parked aircraft with nose guns before dropping bombs into fuel dumps. They catch barges full of soldiers moving at night, guided by radar or by flashes of moonlight on the water, and shred them before the men aboard even realize they have been found. Crews learn that these missions are nothing like traditional bombing runs. There is no long, quiet climb to altitude with plenty of time to think. Low-level sorties are violent from start to finish. Takeoff, low-altitude flight over choppy water, sudden bursts of anti-aircraft fire, immense speed, then instant life or death decisions as the target fills the windshield. Some pilots thrive under that pressure, others burn out quickly. A few refuse to fly low repeatedly and are reassigned. Gunn is ruthless in that regard. He does not hate cowards, he hates waste. A pilot who cannot handle 50-foot runs will not just die, he will get his crew killed and lose an aircraft Gunn fought hard to modify. The Japanese do not just sit and take it, they try to adapt. They add more light anti-aircraft guns to their decks, especially at the bow, hoping to create a wall of fire against head-on attacks. They practice turning into attacking aircraft to present smaller target profiles. They experiment with different formations and try to coordinate fighter cover better. But none of these changes address the fundamental problem. At 50 feet and 200+ miles per hour, the B-25 closes the distance too fast. There's not enough time for gunners to track effectively, and the moment they start to aim, the nose guns open up and force them to dive for cover or die where they stand. The destroyer may be bristling with weapons, but if every man operating those weapons is lying on the deck fighting for his life, the ship is functionally unarmed. Each new success adds to Gunn's strange reputation. To some pilots, he is a hero, the man who gave them a weapon that works. To others, he is a dangerous fanatic, willing to risk everything on tactics that skates along the edge of suicide. On the ground, he is not dramatic. He is gruff, often exhausted and completely focused on mechanical details. He will spend hours under a wing with a wrench, making sure a gun mount will not shear off under recoil, then bark at a pilot for 5 minutes because his approach angle was sloppy. He rarely talks about anything not directly related to killing ships or keeping planes in the air. If someone tries to have a normal conversation with him about life before the war, he usually walks away. News eventually reaches him that Manila has been liberated and that the internment camps have been opened. The confirmation that his wife and children are alive comes through military channels, sparse and delayed. There is no phone call, no video, just a short written message confirming their names on a list of recovered civilians. For a few minutes after reading it, Gunn does something his men have never seen before. He sits down on an ammo crate and does nothing. No instructions, no orders, no sarcasm. Just stillness. One of the crew chiefs who has been with him from the beginning later says that was the only time he looked older than his age, as if all 3 years hit him in a single moment. When he finally speaks, he does not give a speech about fate or sacrifice. He tells the men to get back to work. The war is not over. The Japanese are still fighting on multiple islands. Their navy is not completely destroyed. His family being alive does not guarantee they will stay that way if the war drags on unnecessarily. Gunn goes back to doing the only thing he knows how to do, turning airplanes into tools that end the fighting faster. As the months pass and the Allies push closer to Japan, the tactical impact of the Strafer doctrine becomes impossible to ignore. Logistics officers draw charts showing dramatic drops in the amount of supplies the Japanese can deliver to forward units. Ground commanders notice that enemy counterattacks are weaker and less frequent. Intelligence officers report more instances of Japanese units being cut off and abandoned because their resupply convoys never arrived. Some of these gaps are caused by submarines, some by traditional bombing, but a large share is the direct result of low-level gunship attacks that make every coastal route a death trap. After the war, official histories start to take shape. Committees collect documents, battle reports, and personal accounts. They interview generals and admirals. They produce detailed analyses of why the Allies won. In those thick volumes, Gunn's name appears, but not on every page it deserves. There are diagrams of the B-25J with its solid nose and multiple guns. There are paragraphs describing field modifications pioneered by theater maintenance personnel. His story is flattened into a line item. Years later, a reporter tracks him down for an interview. By then, Gunn is no longer standing on jungle airstrips. He's back in the Philippines, working in civilian aviation again, flying and repairing planes for peacetime customers. The reporter wants a quote about his contribution to the war, something patriotic that will fit nicely in a newspaper column. He asks Gunn if he is proud of inventing the Strafer B-25 and helping to change air tactics in the Pacific. Gunn thinks for a moment before answering. He could talk about tonnage sunk or convoys destroyed. He could talk about how the design he hammered together under palm trees ended up on production lines in America. Instead, he looks past the reporter, out toward a small group of people standing near the edge of the airfield. His children are there, older now, no longer starving, talking to each other while they wait for him to finish. His wife stands beside them, healthier than she was when soldiers first opened the gates of Santo Tomas, but still marked by what she survived. He tells the reporter he did not set out to invent anything. He says he was just tired of watching bombs miss and men die for no reason. He explains that when someone tells you a change is impossible, you have two choices. You can accept their calculations and hope they are right, or you can test the idea yourself and accept the consequences if they are wrong. He says the engineers were not villains. They were just cautious in a way that war did not allow. Then he adds one more sentence that never makes it into the cleaned-up magazine version of the interview. He says, "If following the rules meant leaving my family in that camp for another year, then the rules were wrong." By the end of the war, Strafer B-25s and other low-level attack bombers had sunk or damaged more Japanese shipping than anyone predicted when the conflict began. They did not do it with revolutionary new technology or secret weapons. They did it with machine guns that already existed, mounted in places they were never meant to be, flown by crews who were willing to come home with salt spray on their windshields and bullet holes in their wings. The official records list statistics and mission numbers. The reality behind those numbers is a simple pattern. One stubborn mechanic refused to wait for permission, proved his idea in combat, and forced an entire system to adapt. If he had listened to the first set of warnings and walked away from the welding torch, the Battle of the Bismarck Sea would have looked very different. High-altitude bombers would have dropped their loads, missed, and gone home. The convoy would have reached Leh. Thousands of Japanese soldiers would have reinforced the garrisons in New Guinea. The ground war there would have dragged on, costing more lives on both sides. Perhaps the schedule of the Pacific campaign would have shifted. Perhaps the liberation of Manila would have been delayed. The people in Santo Tomas might have faced another hungry winter. There is no way to know exactly how many lives that single modification saved, but it is safe to say the number is far higher than the tally of ships sunk. That is the real weight behind those gun camera clips of ships exploding and convoys burning. They are not just displays of engineering and courage. They are the proof that in a vast industrial war, individual decisions still matter. One man looked at a bomber, looked at a problem, and refused to accept that "this is how we have always done it" was a good enough answer. He made the plane uglier, heavier, and more dangerous to fly. In return, it became the weapon his theater needed. And somewhere inside the wire fences of an internment camp, 4 children lived long enough to see their father walk through the gates and take them home. If you made it this far, you just watched the story of how one mechanic with a welding torch changed the air war in the Pacific. Paul Gunn did not wait for permission. He did not accept that impossible meant impossible. He built what the experts said would never fly, and it became one of the most effective ship-killing weapons of World War II. Stories like this do not show up in most history books. They get buried in footnotes or forgotten completely. That is why this channel exists. to find the people who broke the rules, ignored the warnings, and changed the outcome of battles when no one thought they could. If you want more stories like this, hit the subscribe button right now. We are building a library of untold World War II accounts that deserve to be remembered. Every video takes days of research, script writing, and production. Your subscription tells us to keep going. If this story shocked you, inspired you, or made you think differently about how wars are actually won, leave a like. It helps more people discover this channel. And if you know someone who loves military history or engineering stories, share this video with them. These stories are too good to watch alone. Now, here is where I need your help. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Did Gunn make the right call, or should he have followed the engineer's warnings? And more importantly, what story do you want to see next? Another aircraft modification that changed a battle? A tank crew that did the impossible? A soldier who survived something no one should have survived? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your suggestions directly shape what we cover next. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about the people history tried to forget, and I will see you in the next one.